next service. So the book of Revelation is the only book in the Bible that promises a blessing to those who read it, hear it, and keep it. Also, it is a book that comes with its own outline. We looked at that last week in the afternoon service. In Revelation chapter 1, verse 19 says this, write the things which thou hast seen. That's the first part. The things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. That's into the future. So the first part of the outline is not verse 1, chapter 1, the vision of the glorified Jesus Christ. The things which thou hast seen, as he sees Jesus' glorified form. Then the things which are, the churches, chapter 2 and 3. The letters to the 7 churches, and we're going to look at that today and then also, after Father's Day. The letters to the 7 churches representing church history also. These churches they're literal churches. They're churches that was there in John's day. And if you look at the afternoon service, talk about this. If you look at these churches are in Asia Minor, which back then was called Asia Minor. Today would be modern day Turkey. So if you look at the country of Turkey, and if this is the Mediterranean, these churches would be like this. There was a Roman postal route when they would deliver the mail, and they would follow that road, and the churches are in order of that. You would have Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, and so on, and it go up, just like and they're listed in that order. And also, these churches are not just literal churches there, but they represent, a lot of people believe, and it is, you can see it clearly, it represents all of church history. Now, when we say church history, this is a lot of times, quote unquote, church history. So this is in other words, there's a lot of things that were messed up with the churches in church history. So you don't necessarily want to go into church history to try to see how a church should be. You want to go to the book of Acts, the Bible. You want to go to the Word of God. You can see the Church of Jerusalem. You can see the Church of Antioch. You can see the epistles of Paul and the truth that we learn from the Word of God. Church history, there was a lot of messed up things that went on. So chapter 2 and 3 deals with these churches, and also they represent church history. So when you look at the book of Revelation, chapter 1, the things that thou hast seen, the glorified Jesus Christ in chapter 1. The churches, chapter 2 and 3. And then chapter 4 through 22 is future. So in that section, chapters 4 and 5 pictures the church in heaven. You're going to see a switch after chapter 3. So chapter 2 and 3, you're going to see the church, the church, the church, the church, the church. Chapter 4, you're going to see come up hither. That, we believe, is the rapture. Now, if you take things literal, if you take a literal approach to the scriptures and a literal approach to Revelation, it's easy to see that. Now, I know a lot of people that don't believe chapter 4 is talking about the rapture, but to me, it's easy to see. Because the church is raptured, and then you're not going to see the church on this earth in the book of Revelation, where you're not going to see the word church again. You're not going to see the church until chapter 19. So all this whole time, the church is in heaven. So the church is in heaven, and then now on the earth is going to be the tribulation period. So the tribulation period is going to come sometime after the rapture. So chapter 4 is the rapture. So the church is raptured, and chapter 4 and 5 is the church in heaven. You see the throne room in chapter 4 and 5. You will see God the Father, his throne in chapter 4. You're going to see Jesus Christ on the throne in chapter 5. That's why I'm amazed that people have the audacity to say that Jesus Christ is not God. Then why is he in the throne room being worshipped? You don't worship anyone but God. Jesus never denied the worship of himself. So that would either make him a blasphemer, or that would make him God. Not a good person.
That's right.
If he's not God. He's a good person, but if he's if he's not God, he can't be a good person. When he's committing what the Jews would, it was a sin worthy of being stoned to death for you to say you're a God when you are not. So we know Jesus is God. Otherwise, he would have been a blasphemer. So chapter 4 and 5, the church is in heaven. And then chapter 6 through 19 is the tribulation period. And that's, of course, the bulk of the book of Revelation. The tribulation period is for three basic reasons. To shake up the heathen, to wake up a nation, Israel. Israel has been placed in the background scenes. And the church is in the forefront right now. And that has happened since the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And the church came on the scene. I believe the church began on Pentecost. And we call that the church age. The church age is obviously going to be officially concluded when the rapture takes place. So when the church is raptured, God is going to be dealing with the nation of Israel, who rejected the Messiah and crucified him. Well, they're going to be dealt with, and then in the end, all of true Israel will be saved. It says that in Revelation, or in Romans chapter 11. That's prophesied. It also speaks about that in the Old Testament. We looked at that last week. So it's to shake up the heathen, wake up a nation, and also to make up the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom, we believe in a literal millennial reign. That's 1,000-year reign with Jesus Christ. Now, a lot of people don't believe that. But I believe in a literal millennial reign, and like it describes in Revelation chapter 20. Some people take that allegorically, which we talked about that, the problems with that approach, how it's contradictory and to me difficult to have that approach the way it's described in Revelation chapter 20. There's a 1,000-year literal reign, and the devil is going to be chained up for 1,000 years. So if it's not a literal reign, and if it's allegorical, how does that apply to the devil being chained up? Well, that crowd that believes that says that, well, he was hindered at the cross. And that's why the gospel was able to be spread. Okay, then what does it mean when he's going to be released after the 1,000 years? So whatever the cross did to hinder the devil is going to be undone. So when you try to force doctrine if you try to force the Bible to say something that it's not saying, then there's going to be all kind of problems with other things. It's just not going to match up. It's not going to align up. You take it just face value literal, it's easier, better. I believe that's the way the Bible is written. Yeah. So to make up the millennium, so that's chapter 6 through 19. Chapter 20 is the millennial reign. Satan will be bound for 1,000 years, and then he will be released. At the end of the 1,000 years, it's going to be the final rebellion, the final conflict, the final battle. And there are going to be people that follow the devil. You think, why would someone want to follow the devil after living on the earth for 1,000 years where Jesus ruled and reigned? Well, I honestly don't know why anyone would follow the devil then. I don't know why anyone would want to follow the devil now. But what happens? He's a master deceiver, right? And people will believe the devil and will believe the lies. Why? Because sometimes how it is, we love our sin. And the devil is going to say, hey, you can do what you want. You want to do it? Just do it. Just party. Live it up. Don't follow Jesus. He's going to tell you, thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Yeah. Why did Adam and Eve follow the devil, believe the devil then, when the Lord created the garden that they lived in? Gave them all those beautiful, the beautiful garden, Eden being pleasant, and all those trees and everything. And only one tree they couldn't eat from, and the devil made them think that the Lord doesn't love them because he's withholding. And of course, he ended up speaking to Eve, who got the message secondhand, and she ended up giving it to Adam, and he just ate it. And by the way, God held Adam responsible.
That's right.
So chapter 20, 21, and 22 is a new heavens and a new earth. That would be the eternal kingdom. And that's it. So that's not hard. Chapter 1, the things that thou hast seen. The vision of the glorified Jesus Christ. Chapter 2 and 3, the churches. Chapters 4 through 22, the tribulation period primarily. The tribulation period, chapters 6 through 19, and chapters 4, the church is raptured. Chapter 4 and 5, the church in heaven. Chapter 6 through 19, the tribulation period, deals with shaking up the heathen, waking up a nation, dealing with the enemies of God. Judgment, of course, is coming. And waking up a nation, the nation of Israel, to draw them back to Jesus Christ, who they crucified and rejected. And then also to make up the millennial kingdom, 1,000-year reign with Jesus Christ. Why is that so hard? It's a book that just divides up nicely. So the letters to the 7 churches is where we are right now. Now, these letters to these 7 churches, they are to be applied to the local church, those particular churches, as Jesus is dealing with those particular churches in John's day. This was the area of Asia Minor or Turkey. These are cities you can go to today. 2 of them still have structures or church buildings on them. I'm not saying it's their gospel preaching churches, but there's a place you can go, a building that is a church, so to speak, till this day. 2 of them, which would be Smyrna and Philadelphia. And then the other ones are cities you can go to. They were in existence in John's day. So they were located, like I said, on an old Roman postal circuit, where you could go in that order from Ephesians, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, and all the way to Laodicea. These are also the letters to these churches can be applied to ecclesiastically, which means there's a lot of church information. Ecclesiastically means that's the church. Like in Spanish, iglesia, how do you say it in Spanish? Iglesia, the church. So there's a lot of information that a church can learn from. If we want to study how a church should be, look to the letters. There's a lot of great information on how we as a church should be in these 7 letters. It can be applied. We can apply this to our church. It can also be applied to personally, to each person in the church, these truths. And then another thing is, it is prophetic. That these churches in John's day were future, but we look back historically. These churches represent church history, and it's amazing. And that's what a lot of times we'll focus on, the church history, based on these 7 churches. So the time periods are Ephesus, AD 30 to AD 100 would be the apostolic period. Why? You still had apostles alive. In fact, the last apostle is John. That's writing the book of Revelation as he's given a vision. Then from 100 to 313 is the martyred church, or Smyrna. That's a time period where there's going to be 10 waves of Roman persecution. 10 Roman emperors, from Nero to Diocletian. Then you have Pergamos, which is marriage, the compromising church. That's the time period where the persecution ended. Why did it end? We'll talk about that this afternoon. One of the most significant things that happened in church history. We'll talk about that this afternoon. Something happened that stopped the Roman persecution. What was it? So that's the compromising church, that part of church history. Then the church at Thyatira, we'll also look at that this afternoon. Then the church at Sardis, that's when the Reformation time period. The church at Philadelphia, that's the mission time period where there's a lot of missionaries sent out from 1700 to 1900. And then the last time period is the Laodicea time period from 1901 to the rapture. And that would be the worldly church. That's where we are today. in the time period of church history. In general, that just covers the time period. I'm not saying, oh, we're the worldly church. But we exist during that time period from 1901 all the way to the rapture. It's described in these churches. So the pattern that is given in these letters, it's like this. First, there's going to be a positive affirmation, kind of like a sandwich approach. Something positive is going to be stated. This is going to be the normal way, but there's a couple exceptions. Then there's going to be a corrective exhortation, that there's something that needs to change. And then there's going to be an eternal motivation. He's gonna say something to them that has to do with eternity, because that's the only thing that really motivates us, is eternity, because that's what's long lasting. You know, if you're going to disciple someone, if you're going to be involved with ministry, if you're going to try to encourage people to seek the Lord, there has to be an eternal motivation, because that's the difference between serving the Lord and just serving self on earth. When you serve the Lord, there's an eternal blessing, there's an eternal motivation, and He's going to give that. There's also going to be a partial revelation. He's going to take a phrase or part of what is revealed concerning Jesus Christ in His glorified form, and He's going to reiterate it to the church in some way, which has something to do with the message that He's trying to give to them. And also the names of the city. The names of the city has to do with the message, which is real interesting. I mean, only God could have written the Word of God for all it is to be like that. Right? The name of the city itself has to do with the message to that church. Okay, church number 1. Revelation chapter 2, verse 1. Unto the angel, remember the angel are either angels, I guess you could say like a guardian angel of a church, or some believe it's to the pastor of the church. To me, I think it's probably some kind of an angel. I don't know. Because I don't know why they would describe it as angel and it not be an angel. Rather just... But anyway, you can think however you want with that. Under the angel of the church of Ephesus write, These things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand. And that's obviously Jesus Christ walking in the midst of the churches. Some people say that I'm not in the church. In fact, we went door knocking last week, and 2 people said this to me. Oh, I'm not into organized religion. And I said the same thing to both of them. Oh, you love our church because we're not very organized. No, I'm just joking to say something funny. They kind of laugh, but I just don't, I think somebody can just stay at home and read the Bible. Oh, I agree with you, we could read the Bible at home, but that doesn't take the place of church. And Jesus Christ is into the church. In fact, the Bible says that husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church, and He gave Himself for it. I would say that He's into it, right? In fact, in Timothy says that the church is the pillar and the ground of the truth. It's only foolishness for someone to say that the church is not important. That's right. It is He that holdeth the 7 stars in His right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. So the candlesticks represents the church, doesn't give off the light. Jesus is the light. We reflect His light. We get the light out to the world. The light is Jesus Christ. So the name Ephesus means desirable or darling or love. That's the name of that town, Ephesus. And yet the church there is the church that left its first love. Now notice the term in, we got to read verse 2. It says, I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and how thou hast canst not bear them which are evil, and hast tried them which say there are apostles and are not, and found them liars. And thou hast borne and hast patience for my name's sake, hast labored and not fainted. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. They did not lose their first love. Some people say that. That's a church that lost its first love. They did not lose their first love. They left their first love. You don't lose your salvation, in a sense. But we could leave the closeness that we have to Jesus Christ. And when you do that, what happens? We lose our ability to love others. Yeah. And that goes out the window. You can tell if someone is close to Jesus by how much love they have for somebody else. For other people in general. Even to love the unlovable. You can tell. In fact, Jesus said that people are going to know that you are my disciples because of the love that you have for one another. And when our love for each other dwindles, it's because our relationship with Jesus is dwindling. That's right. It goes together. So Ephesus. Ephesus was a beautiful city. It was the main city of the province of Asia. It was in Ephesus that the temple of the goddess Artemis or Diana was located, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. You can read about that in Acts chapter 19. It's the largest Greek temple ever built. The city had a population of 225,000 and it grew to over 2 million during its pagan festivals to Diana. Diana had more worshippers than any other ancient idol. She was the goddess of fertility, and her worship involved immoral practices. Ephesus was also the main center of Greek culture and heathen idolatry. Aquila and Priscilla and Apollos labored in this city. And Paul had one of his greatest ministries in this city, and he was in Ephesus longer than any other city. John left Jerusalem and came to Ephesus to pastor the church there for 30 years. This is the Apostle John, the pastor of the church at Ephesus. And remember that he was arrested. We talked about that last week. He was arrested. He was arrested by not Nero, but the one after Nero. I forget his name. Started with a D. Diocletian or similar to that. I think it's well, anyway. He was arrested, and because he did not want to burn that pinch of incense and say Caesar is Lord. He said, I'm not going to do that. And he was arrested, and then they had him fried in a boiling pot of oil. But he didn't get hurt. So they're frustrated. They made him drink poison. He didn't die. They had someone else drink the poison and thought maybe it's not that poison. Not that much poison in it. That person died instantly. Man, this is working against us. So they decided to exile him on the island of Patmos. Wow. So the church was started by Apostle Paul. We read about that in Acts chapter 19. He was in Ephesus for 2 years longer than any other place. And so this church obviously was a church that had the right doctrine. I mean, Apostle Paul starts it. Here you have John pastoring it. But at some point in time, they lost their first love. I believe what happens to a church like this, they become legalistic. And they become very condemning. And then they have the attitude of, hey, we have all the right doctrines, we have the right standards, we look right, we act right, we are right, and Jesus is saying, but you missed it in the most important area. He says, I know thy works. Oh, they labored. By the way, Jesus knows our works. Our labor is not forgotten by him. He remembers our labors of love. He knows he said, I know your works, I know your labor, and I know your patience. This is endurance. And you continue on. Nothing can stop you. And that's how we should be. These are good things. And how thou canst not bear them which are evil. thou hast tried them which say they are apostles. In fact, John wrote Revelation. He also wrote the book of John. He also wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And these books that he wrote was warning believers of those that came into the church that were going to be deceivers. He calls them antichrists. And he says that. And we see that Jesus is saying, you did what you were taught. You were able to recognize them that were evil. You know, we need to know the Word of God to where when someone comes in as a false teacher, we can recognize that that's heresy. And they knew that. They did not put up with those that are evil. They stood for the truth, because that's where the devil is going to attack a church. First and foremost is in the area of doctrine, teaching. He says, you're good on that. Thou hast tried them which say they are apostles. There are a lot of people that may say they are apostles, or they may say they are evangelists, or say they are pastors or teachers or theologians. That doesn't necessarily mean that they really are. Those that say they are apostles and are not, and found them liars. And hast borne and hast patience, and for my name's sake hath labored. He says, that's good. And has not fainted. He says, that's really good. Now, all the other apostles were already dead. They were all martyred. John is the only one left, and he was, of course, boiled in oil. And the Lord spared him so that he could go to the island of Patmos and receive this vision. Now, John is the only apostle that died of natural causes. We know that the only other one that wasn't martyred was Judas, because he hung himself. But then now John is the last one there. And, of course, you know that the Roman emperor wanted him dead because people held him in high regard, high esteem. He's the last person that actually talked with Jesus on this earth. I'm sure when he came to a church, whatever he said, that they would just listen to every word. And he had a tremendous influence over the believers. So they wanted him to be dead, because they were wanting to pass this taxation, and they wanted to promote the emperors as gods. Well, at least this one emperor in John's day was that way. He set up himself and he said that he was a god. And John said, no, you're not. So they couldn't kill him. They didn't want to keep trying. You know, it would have been worse for them. They said, man, it's going to start to, make more people listen to John, right? So they had him exiled. But God used that to give him that vision. The Lord says this, nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. They didn't lose it, they left it. Now, they had many good qualities, but they lacked the most important quality, love. Their hearts were drifting away from the Lord, and as a result, they lost their ability to love others. The greatest commandment is love. Matthew 27, verse 37 through 40. Jesus said unto him, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Galatians 5:14. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, what does the law want to do? The law wants to make us righteous. But it couldn't. It can't do it. So the only way we can become righteous is in Jesus, substitutionarily. That's why he died in our place. For he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. So we can be made righteous in Jesus. And when we walk with Jesus, what happens to us is the law becomes fulfilled. Not because of keeping the law, but because of walking with Jesus. Because as a believer, we're not under the law. We're dead to the law. The law has no jurisdiction over a dead person. So when you're raised up a new creature in Christ who is under the authority of Jesus Christ. And when we walk with Jesus, then the love of Jesus is going to be reflected upon our countenance. That's why the Bible, when the Jews looked at Peter and John, the religious leaders. When they looked at Peter and John and they saw and they perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men, they marveled and took knowledge of them that they had been with Jesus. There's something different about them because they spent time with Jesus. And when we spend time with Jesus, what's going to happen? What the law is trying to do is going to be done by us walking with Jesus, not by the law itself. But the law is still happy because what it wanted to accomplish is done. In that we are, I mean, I know that, you know what I'm saying, the law, I'm trying to describe that the law is actually fulfilled in us receiving Jesus Christ. Amen. That's why the Bible says all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. You know, the Bible says the fruit of the Spirit. When you walk with Jesus, then the Spirit leads and guides us and gives us the fruit. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. And it says what? Against such there is no what? No law. The law can't do that. Only the Spirit of Christ can produce it in us. The law only can do two things. It can kind of keep us civil. That's what it did. The Mosaic law for the nation of Israel. It kept them from killing each other for the most part. At least less people then would be without any kind of law and be anarchy and total chaos. So it kept the order, and it also showed them that they were not able to keep it. So what did it do? It pointed them to Jesus Christ. The Bible says in Galatians that the law is our schoolmaster. The point is to Christ. So two things: keep the order and the point is to point people to Jesus Christ. That's what the law did. Once you receive Jesus Christ, you're no longer under the law. We're under Jesus Christ. Amen. That's why the law is fulfilled in one word: love. John 13:35. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if ye have what? Love. Love one to another. That's how people are going to know and recognize. So do we got to work on our love? No, we just got to work on our relationship with Jesus. That happens naturally. So Jesus says this to the church at Ephesus: remember therefore from whence thou art fallen. He says you're going to have to, you know, when you lose something, when someone comes up to you and says, I lost my wallet, what's the first thing you tell them? When's the last time you had it? When do you remember having it? So Jesus is saying that. You lost your first love. Yeah, okay. So go back to where you had it. What did you used to do when you had that close relationship with Jesus? And you knew that you had it because you had a love for people. Oh, that's when I used to go to church. Well, then go back to church. Right. Oh, I had it when I used to have my devotions on a regular basis. Well, then do that again. Oh, I used to have that when I used to go to the prayer meetings. Well, then go find out what was it when you had it. You go back there where you lost it. Remember therefore from whence thou art fallen, and repent. Do the first works, or else I will come unto thee quickly and remove thy candlestick out of its place, except thou repent. The church is not there today. He says, if you're not going to have love, he says, I will not allow you to continue to exist. You have to have that. He says, get it back. Today, Ephesus is a city controlled by Islam. The light of the church has been removed. Jesus will not be a part of a church that does not have love. And then, of course, he finishes with positive, like the sandwich approach, right? But this thou hast hatest the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. Nike. He's to conquer. Conquerors of the people. They were a group of teachers that ruled over the congregations, and they were perverted. They were basically trying to control people. You don't want anyone to control you other than Jesus Christ. Amen. It's good to encourage. We need to encourage people. We need to pray for people. But you don't want someone to have that kind of authority over you. So he says that you hate the deeds of the Nicolaitans. You don't allow people to be controlling and in that way. He says, I hate that also. That's good. And he says in verse 7, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. So you see, this is personal too, right? Because it's saying, he that hath an ear. Now, who in here has an ear? We got 2 ears. So even double.
Wow.
If you have an ear, then hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So this is to us individually, right? Easy to see that. See, is Revelation that hard?
No, it's not.
It says, is this for me? Do you have an ear? Yeah, okay. It's for you. I got 2 ears. Well, it's for you twice. It's for me too. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. You know, the tree of life we read about in the book of Genesis. And of course, after they sinned, God did not allow them to eat of the tree of life. Because if he did, then they would live forever in their sinful condition. That means they would be eternally separated from God forever. In other words, they would have had to have gone to hell. So he did not allow them to be eternal creatures in their sin. So it was the grace of God. So when they sinned, there's a cherubim that guarded the tree of life. But then now, he's saying to this church that I will let you eat of it, and you will live forever in your saved condition. And you'll be able to enjoy the paradise of God. So he speaks of the blessedness of heaven, that you may have difficulties on earth, or there may be trials, but the sufferings of this present time are not even worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. And that's for all believers. The second church, the church of Smyrna. Unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things said the first and the last, which is dead and is alive. Smyrna means myrrh. In order to get the fragrance, you had to crush it. It was extracted from a tree. In fact, it was a tree with thorns. And they had to crush it in order to get the fragrance. So it's the crushing. You know, the tree speaks of the cross. The crushing of the cross brings forth a beautiful fragrance. And that's what was produced because of Jesus' crucifixion, his death, burial, and resurrection. Now the tree speaks of the myrrh speaks of this beautiful fragrance because myrrh was a burial spice, obviously to cover up the smell of death, right? Now, when Jesus was born, there's 3 times that Jesus was brought myrrh. At his birth, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And those spoke of something. Like the gold spoke of the fact that Jesus is king. It speaks of deity, gold. Frankincense is what they would burn at the temple. And that's what the priests would burn. And so it was a fragrance that was made for worship. You couldn't make it for yourself. And that speaks of Jesus Christ as priest. So he's a king, he's a priest, and what else? A prophet. So myrrh speaks of a prophecy that Jesus said, you destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. That was prophetic. Now, he wasn't talking about the temple. He was talking about his body, right?
Yeah.
So it was a prophecy. Now that prophecy was fulfilled when he rose again. So Jesus Christ is a prophet, and the prophecy, the most important prophecy, the ultimate prophecy, And we know that he is who he says he is because he did rise again. Because he said he would. He said it 3 times, face value, and even hinted to it even more than that he was going to rise again. And he did rise again. The prophecy was fulfilled. So they brought him myrrh at his birth, and they also brought him myrrh when he was on the cross. And what they would do when someone was on the cross, they would bring this myrrh because it would deaden the pain. So it would help them to go through the crucifixion. What did Jesus do when they gave him the myrrh? He refused it. He wanted to have the full effect of the torture and the crucifixion of the cross. And then later, they brought him like a vinegar, like some kind of a beverage, and he took that. So some people think, why did he take that and they didn't take the myrrh? For him to take the myrrh, so the criminals, what they would do, they would take the myrrh so it would help them cope with the pain. But they would refuse that second drink because that second drink would give you that it would give you the liquids that you needed to sustain yourself, so you would live longer. So what they would do, they would take the one that eased the pain, but they would refuse to take the rest because they wanted to die quicker. Where Jesus didn't take the one that would relieve the pain, but he took the second one that would allow him to feel the pain even longer. And that's what he did. But he did not take the myrrh. And then the third time he was offered myrrh was when the ladies came to anoint the body of Jesus. They came to bring the myrrh to anoint his body when he wasn't there. You don't need myrrh because he already rose again. You know, in Isaiah 60, it says, when this is in the book of Isaiah, speaking of the return of Jesus Christ, he says, when that happens, and I'll read this, or it's in the notes, the multitude of camels shall cover thee, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all they from Sheba shall come, they shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord. Gold and incense, but no myrrh. Why not? Because the prophecy had already been fulfilled. The prophecy was only given at his birth of what he was going to do, but at this point he already did. So there's no need for the myrrh to speak of the prophecy. Well, anyway, so Smyrna. Unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write these things, said the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. Of course, that's another picture of Jesus Christ. The first and the last, like he says, he's the Alpha and the Omega. That which is he which was dead and is alive, because he's resurrected. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty. This was a persecuted church. They were persecuted severely. But he says, but thou art rich. You know, if you look back at the last church, the church at Laodicea, it says in Revelation chapter 3, verse 17, it says, because thou sayest, I am rich. The church at Laodicea says, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing. And knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. It says, you say you are rich, but you're poor. But the church at Smyrna, he says to this church, you may be poor, he says, but I'm telling you, you're rich. This is a persecuted church, and this church received no condemnation. This church and only one other church received no condemnation, because persecution purifies the church. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty. They were going through tribulation. This is not the tribulation period. This is talking about trials and tribulations. That they were in a city where they were oppressed. But thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of they which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Now, this is not a church that should encourage people to be anti-Semitic or against the Jews. This verse is saying that the Jews were persecuted by the Romans, and the Christians were being persecuted by the Romans. So what the Jews would do, some of them, like a Jew that understands the truth is going to receive Jesus Christ, right? And that's what's going to happen at the end of the tribulation for 1/3 of them that are in existence probably today around that number. At the end time period, 2/3 are going to be killed during the tribulation period, and 1/3 is going to receive Jesus Christ as Savior. They're going to look upon Him and whom they have pierced, as the Bible says, and they're going to mourn for Him as one that mourneth for the only begotten Son. They're going to embrace and receive and understand who Jesus Christ is. But there's going to be some that don't. So he's saying here, they say they are Jews, but they really are not. But what they're doing is they're trying to divert the attention from themselves to the Christians. So instead of the Romans coming after them and persecuting the Jews, they're going to go after the Christians, and they were saying things that weren't true. Like the communion was some kind of a cannibalistic love feast, which they would consume human flesh, and they would do all these immoral things, and they started to speak negative about the believers, and it caused them to be persecuted, and it caused them to be put to death. They said bad things about them. So he's saying, but they are Jews, but they're really not. Just like there was a day, where the so-called Christians during the Crusades would do horrific things in the name of Christ. That does not mean that they're Christians. And one of the when you listen to debates with atheists, they're going to always bring that up. The things that the Christians did, the horrible things, that wasn't true Christians. I mean, Jesus said you're going to know they're Christians by the love that they have for one another. And they're going to be known for being loving. That's how Jesus Christ was. Not going over there and by force, butchering people and cutting them up and doing this and trying to take over Jerusalem and trying to force people to be converted and this and that and all that. That's not the ways of Christ. They said they were Christians, but they are not. That's right. They say they're Jews, but they are not. But they are the synagogue of Satan. Fear none of these things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. This refers to the 10 Roman emperors. In this time period of church history, like I had mentioned, from the year, what was it? From the year 100 AD to 313, this church experienced, or the Christians experienced, persecution from Rome. Ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. What does the Lord want us to be? He wants us to be faithful. And you will receive a crown of life. There are different crowns that people will get. And this is one of the crowns, the martyr's crown, the crown of life. Look at verse 11. I want to read something. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. The ability to go through persecution is one of the clearest signs of someone being a believer. I knew I was going to read something, but I lost it on my phone. There was a pastor of the church at Smyrna, and his name was Polycarp. He was actually a disciple of John, the one that wrote the book of Revelation. And so this was someone that learned from John. And he was 80-something years old, 86 years old. So they came to him when he was the pastor of the church of Smyrna, and they said, Polycarp, you know, you're a popular person in this town. Everybody loves you. You're a good guy and everything. But what we need you to do is we need you to burn the pinch of incense. Just go through the motions. We know you don't believe it. Just do it. And say, Caesar is Lord. And either he did this. Either he said, no, I'm not going to do it. Or some say that he did. He burned a pinch of incense and he said, Jesus is Lord. And he said, we don't want to have you killed. Just do it. He says, 86 years have I served Jesus Christ, and he was faithful to me. I will not be unfaithful to him.
Amen.
And so they built a fire. They built a fire, or they put the wood for the fire, and they put him in the center of it, and they tied him up, and he says, you're going to burn. He says, I'm not going to. They gave him another chance. He did not. So they started the fire, but they could not get the fire going. They could not, you know, and they were getting frustrated. So then one of the Roman soldiers got his spear. Some say he was trying to just kind of move the wood around, or some say that he just went to stab him. So he stabbed John, started the fire. The fire started going up, and he hit a vein in his shoulder. And the blood squirted out and put the fire out. And then so the governor of the city said, John, God obviously has spared you. Just burn the incense or you're going to be burned. He says, you threaten me with a fire that's going to burn for an hour? You, sir, are going to go to hell to the fires that never shall be put out if you don't receive Jesus Christ. And then the fire started and he died.
Wow. Wow.
Be faithful unto the death. What does Jesus want us to do? He says, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. What does he want us to be? Faithful. He did not deliver these people from the persecution. He said, be faithful. He didn't deliver everyone from the virus, right? I know people, and you know people that have passed away.
Yeah.
He said, be faithful. We got to be faithful to him.
Yes.
And that's what he wants us to be. And we have to do it with love, right? Because that's what happened with the first church. We got to be faithful to Jesus, and we got to be Christians, true Christians that show love, that have love, because we have a relationship with Jesus Christ and we love others. He says, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Do you have an ear? Then he's speaking to us. Now this afternoon, there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to stop the persecution. 10 emperors have persecuted the church. And then it's going to come to a complete stop. What was that? What was that? What happened? We're going to talk about that this afternoon. And then we're going to cover 2 more churches to finish off chapter 2. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? With heads bowed and eyes closed and no looking around. The first thing is most important, and that's, do you know for sure if you're to die right now, then you'd be in heaven with Jesus?